Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Coaching Call podcast. On this podcast, we'll cover various types of coaching by trainers in sports, martial arts, fitness, and business. We'll discuss each coach's methods to getting the most out of their respective athletes or clients and how they attempt to change the platform in which they coach. Join us on a fun adventure as we discuss unique coaching styles. Coaching is a universal part of how we get others to get something done. Join your host, Rafael, and his guests on this unique journey in coaching.
Hi, I'm Sifu Rafael, and this is the Coaching Call podcast. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. This episode was made possible by listeners like you. Aaron, how are you this morning, my friend? How's everything?
I'm doing fantastic. Things are going well. Weather's starting to warm up, so it's nice. That's the season we're in and the location I'm at. And how about yourself?
Oh, man, exceptional. What a beautiful day to be alive, right? Every day I try to get a little better, right?
Absolutely.
Just a little. It's okay. I don't need to make bounds and leaps. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes I do, but it's okay if I only do a little, right?
Absolutely. You gotta give yourself that grace. Otherwise, it's not sustainable.
That's for sure. So, Aaron, you and I, we've spoken, and I know that you're doing incredible things, but I want to get to know you before you became you, if you will.
Absolutely.
Where were you born? And before the age of 10, what was your biggest influencers?
No, I was born in Paducah, Kentucky, and I think around 7 or so, we moved around a lot when I was younger. My dad was working as a manager or a salesperson for a pest control company, and he made his way up to being a manager. And so during that path for him, we were moving around a lot. So that was a very large influence. My mother as well, because since we were moving around so much, she chose to homeschool me and my older brother. I currently have 2 brothers. And I think that's how it's going to stay. But an older brother who's 2.5 years older than I am, and then my younger brother who is 11 years younger. And so during that time of my life, the biggest influences were honestly movies. It was a lot of homeschooling, so I didn't get a lot of external, social interaction.
Really?
I spent a lot of time with just my mom in the homeschooling environment, and then my dad was out working a lot, and I respect him so much for that, the challenges that he took, and the life he lived to provide for us and get us to a better spot. At the same time, he wasn't around as often in those years. He would come home late, and he had a lot of love, but it's just one of those things. It wasn't a consistent, but in no way a malicious or intentionally negative thing. It's just, working class. We're getting our way out of poverty, and so my influencers were really movies. I grew up in a lot of structured interaction because that was all I was really exposed to. And then after, probably about 8, 9, 10, started going into the Cub Scouts and then eventually the Boy Scouts of America. And I did get my Eagle Scout in my teen years.
Nice.
But early on, as I think back on that time, it was a lot of, media, comics and just movies and superheroes, really. And since a young age, I mean, I said it in my interview to get the job I currently have. I started 4 years ago. I said in my interview, my goal in life is I just want to be a superhero. I want to be able to help everybody everywhere all at once. And it's unrealistic, but it's a great goal to have, is just how can I influence as many people as possible to help them grow into the people they want to be? How do I inspire inspiration, not just be an egotistical symbol of, oh yeah, I want to be a hero because it's cool. It's more like, how can I inspire others to inspire others? That's been my goal in life.
I love that. It's very interesting. So I love superhero movies, and I go to them, and I got my son. I tried both my sons, but the other one was never really into it. Every so often he'll go, but my oldest son loves superhero movies, and every time he does, we don't live near each other, but he's like, Dad, this new movie's coming out. Did you see the trailer yet? Da, 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 da. So we get into it, right? But the other day, he's also I'm bringing him into one of the businesses as an entrepreneur. I have several of them. I'm bringing him into one of my businesses, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, you believe in me that much, Dad?" I said, "Of course I do." And he goes, "You know, I've always loved Superman the most, and because I'm also an artist, I drew murals and stuff, and in his room, I drew." Spider-Man sitting in the corner, like between two walls, at the corner of a wall, and
Oh
he's sitting,
wow.
and he's in a spider, right? And I made the spider, so I mean the web, so you can feel it, right? I did it with special plaster, if you will.
Wow, that's
So you
incredible.
can you can feel the spider, and at one end of the wall, the Hulk was ripping at the spider, and you can see it being
Wow.
ripped, and the Hulk is coming through. And then on the other wall, I drew Superman and Batman, Superman flying and Batman running. And my son is like, Dad. And then I build him shelves because then we used to go to comic book stores, and I would let him buy collectibles and stuff. He still to this day spends a lot of money on collectibles. And it's a
Yeah, that's definitely a path you go down for sure.
and so it's very interesting when he told me that Superman is his favorite, because it's he's someone that you can look up to, someone who's reliable, somebody who has good traits, good character. What would you say is your favorite superhero?
Funny enough, it actually is Superman as well.
Look at that.
I actually had a lot of Superman memorabilia growing up. It was more of the symbolism, and so I actually still in my closet. I bring out every now and then when I'm feeling funky. But I have a belt buckle that is the Superman
Oh,
S, the hope
nice.
symbol, and the diamond as well. And so I break that out every now and then. It's just a thicker belt, so I don't want to hurt my corporate pants. But I'm going out on a casual night, and I say, well, you know what,
Mm.
my belt buckle should be a statement tonight. I
Ah,
always bring that
nice.
out, and similar reasons. I struggled for a long time with the identity of idolizing Superman in the sense of I'm just a human. What can I
Mhm.
do? Thinking about this ideal and this person that realistically can save the whole world. And there's been talks of like, oh, he can faster than a speeding bullet. He can save everybody everywhere. But then
Mhm.
talking about things like, well, when does he rest? And then his partner Lois Lane is like, what is, the thoughts of, well, early stages of thinking about, well, Superman should be with Wonder Woman because they're the same. And it's thinking about, you know, ideas of how do we connect with each other,
Mhm.
what really comes out as we think about compatibility and growth and changing the world together is it's not just a one person thing. And I used to say, there was a time in my teen years where I said to a friend of mine, I'm like, I want to be Superman, but I'm Green Arrow. And so I was like, and he's like, well, Green Arrow's cool, and I'm like, yeah, but I want to be Superman. And it's that ever present, like, how do I increase my capabilities, how do I do more, and at the same time, how do I stay humble doing that, and then
Yeah,
also accept where is it okay to take that space almost unapologetically, and
yeah,
then make that change and chase after that ideal, and then where are the places where you need people with you. And it's a difficult balance as you grow in your teen years and think about just what kind of person do I want to grow into. And I thought
yeah,
about that a lot growing up.
yeah. When you talked about the movies were a big impact on you, what's one movie that you can recall that you were like, wow?
When I was a kid, so I don't rewatch movies. I don't like to rewatch movies because
Really?
I've seen them unless I forget them enough. So I
Mm,
want it to be a new experience because I was taught growing up, part of our homeschool experience was my mom said, I need a break. So every lunchtime we'll just watch a movie and we'll call it learning. But you have to pull some sort of lesson out of the movie. So that's why I don't rewatch them. I said, well, I've already seen it. I know the lesson. But
mm,
when I forget enough of it, I come back to it. But movies that I have rewatched, I've rewatched the old school. I think it was 2006, 2000 something. The Love Actually, the first movie, and I don't watch the second one. I'm just not a fan of it comparatively, but
Right.
I always loved the first Love Actually because it showed love in so many different ways, and
Mm.
I still watch it like every holiday season. And the editing is rough from that era. It's
Right,
there's
of
some sharp
course.
cuts, but I still love seeing some of those interactions. And the musician that says, what, I guess my manager, you're the love of my life, you're my friend, and that
Mhm.
platonic love. And the little boy that wants to just has his crush, and then the dad that leans on his friend, and there's no romance there. It's just them supporting each other as friends.
Right.
And it's just seeing all the different types of love. And then thinking recently, I know we talked about movies that impact me when I was younger, but recently I just watched the movie The Wild Robot, and that's a movie I've
I haven't
watched
seen it yet.
three times with my friends.
Really?
You've seen it?
I haven't seen it yet. Not
Me
yet. Not
too.
yet. It's
So
good? Good?
yes, yeah, the story is it's like a service robot, like an AI type of
Mm.
just, hey, I'm gonna be your family maid or something. It's the
Mhm.
the that type of future, and it's being shipped, and this robot, like the ship that's shipping them, crashes into a forest, and the robot is trying to find like somebody to take care of, and ends up basically taking care of the forest. But in order to do so, they end up taking care of a young duckling that imprinted on them, and so it's a lot of like reprogramming, quote unquote, like reprogramming itself. It's like, well, I'm supposed to do it this way, but I have to do it this way because this is what motherhood is. This is what parenthood
Right.
is. And then it's very interesting. And especially being a autistic individual, seeing anything robotic
Mm.
makes me just I have such joy seeing it because I feel seen, in the sense
Oh,
of there's an awkwardness. There is, especially homeschooling as well in my teen
mm.
years, like that feeling of, oh, I'll be awkward and laughed at, and nobody's going to tell me why. They're going to say I'm a weirdo, but then I'm going to learn how to interact in a way that's unique to me, but also fits somewhat the parameters of others, and got me to be who I am. Lastly,
Right.
pause that movie at any point and it looks like a watercolor painting, like a canvas painting.
Really?
It's beautiful, yes. So I would definitely
Mhm.
recommend it. Like, I cried multiple times. It's beautiful, fantastic movie. So both of
Awesome.
those are things that really impact me.
Yeah, it's very interesting because when my son was little, I would sit there on Sundays, right? And we just watched for a while because, he fall asleep on my chest and the whole deal. It was like the best experiences for both of us because he still remembers it. And one movie that when he got older, um, we started watching Elf when it first came
Mhm.
out. Oh my God, what a good! We watched that every Christmas, right? Because
Yeah.
it's just funny and it's heartwarming and the whole deal. But when you talked about you went to Cub Scouts and then Boy Scouts and you got your Eagle, right?
Mhm.
Um, what was that like, being that you were mostly secluded
Mhm.
from others? What was that experience like for you?
Thinking back on it, it's hard to really define, because I could say it was awkward, but that's the teenage years.
Mm.
So it's people always ask me, well, Aaron, what was it like being homeschooled? Do you ever wish you were public school? And I said, well, I don't know, because it's all I've known. It's all I've known, and that's got me to become the person I am. So I don't really wish, like, I avoided peer pressure growing up
Mhm.
because of that. So I avoided probably a lot more bullying than I would have um, otherwise. By being homeschooled, I had an environment that catered to my specific needs. And, not knowing until later in my life that I was, diagnosed with autism, unintentionally, because we didn't know when I growing up that I was autistic, but unintentionally they were catering to my needs. I woke up later. We started at 10 o'clock and ended a little later in the
Mm.
day, as opposed to, I got to go to school, quote unquote, homeschooling in my pajamas. So I got to sit in comfort.
Right.
And then the lesson of movies during lunch, it was less of a formal lesson, but it taught me to try to find growth and knowledge and be impacted by the things around me. And
Mhm.
so, going back to your question of what was it like in scouts, you know, I think it was the same as anyone else. I didn't talk about as many things as the other boys did, in the sense of, hey, they came from the same school, so they gossip a bit about people they knew, but then I would just go do my own thing, or I would just sit and listen. It was never, there was never a necessity for me to fit in a certain way. At the
Right.
same time, I also did, because that's what you do in your teen years. You figure out who you are relative to other people. And so that was all I really got exposed to, but I spoke more with the adults because I was interested in their conversations more. They talked about things that had more nuance, or, the humor of little boys. While I still had that, it wasn't all I did. I
Right.
didn't want to sit around making crass jokes or things like that. And I still
Right.
did, but
Right.
there's just an even amount of time sitting around the fire during campouts, listening to the adults have conversations, and really thinking about just thinking about who I was relative to other people. That was
Mhm.
all I really spent my teenage years doing. And I think I would have definitely had a more fleshed out version of myself
Right.
if I had gone to public school, because I would have had more data points to compare with. At the same time, I like who I am. I love who I am. It took a long time to get to this point. But I think that at 28 years old, I got to this point a lot faster than some people. And I have clients that are 40 years old that I talk with, and they say, "You're wise beyond your years." And I said, "Yeah, I've spent all my life thinking about who am I and who do I want to be." And when I coach people, that's what I say is, who are you and who do you want to be?
Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting, and you talked about different people, and they don't always know who they are,
Hmm.
or who they want to be, or what their purpose or their why is. Let's get back to when you decided that it was time to look for a career. What was that path like? What was it for you? And when your mom was homeschooling you, and and I love the fact that you said your dad didn't do anything malicious. He was just providing for you guys.
Hmm.
And that's the old school, right? Mom stays at home with the kids, and dad goes and works, and you barely ever see dad. That's the old way. Now, unfortunately, both parents are working, and you barely see either parent.
Sometimes,
And,
yeah.
and the kids are going to a public school, and maybe they're just seeing a babysitter, and they barely see their parents. So you were fortunate enough to spend time with your mom. Did that relationship evolve further as you got older?
It definitely evolved in the opposite direction. My
You want to be away from her, right?
Yeah, so my mom was always very protective, which was nice, but she overcorrected a lot. And
Mm,
both my parents had really tough childhoods,
right.
and they both found themselves out of poverty. And they said our kids are not going to do that; they're not going to live in that life. And so they fought really hard. In that way, like I said, have a lot of respect for my dad for working constantly to get to this point, and I respect my mom a lot for providing for us and taking on the role of teacher when I know it's not the easiest thing.
Right.
And so they both also fell really heavily into their roles. As I think about my dad now, I know that he's looking on the horizon of retirement, and he's fighting it because he's like, I don't know what I'm going to do when I'm not working. I'm like, you don't
Mm,
have to build your identity around working.
yeah.
And that's part of it. That's part of the growth is, you know, I respect their sacrifice. I love them for it. I also am ready for them to move away from it. And so my mom, the relationship is, as I gained more independence, she didn't want me to gain the independence. She wanted me to, but she didn't. It's like
Of
when
course.
I go back home, it's, oh, you're my baby and I'm gonna baby you. It's like, yes, but I'm also a 28-year-old man. Like we need to talk about certain, like we need to be friends at this point, as we grow. Our relationship has to evolve to friendship. There needs to be that base in order to maintain. Like you talk with your son about, hey, have you seen this movie? It's like there are pieces that are lacking there in my relationship, and that's
Mm,
something that will build over time. It is tough because my mom, I define it's, some people say it's not a very PC term. I do not consider it in that way. I think that it is perfectly encaptures the relationship that I have with my mother, and it is not in any way derogatory, but it's that term of tiger mom, right? And that's just that Asian stereotype of, you can't have dinner until you finish this piano ballad, which,
Right.
was not that strict, but there was definitely, in my mom's life, she got out of the Philippines through scholastic value. Like the most popular kids in school in the Philippines were, from her account, were the nerds and the scholastic, and the debate club, because they were going to get out. Here in the Americas, there's a lot of like the jocks are really the sports and things like that. But no, we valued the scholastic achievement, and so my mom wanted to instill that in us. As a result, our grading system when homeschooled was A, B, or F. Anything less than 80% was considered a failure. So in exchange, I got a very overbearing, overloving mother that I would be 15 years old getting the mail down the street, and she'd be in the window watching, and I'm like, Mom, like, it's fine. And then she wanted a lot of perfection in the sense of scholastic achievement. So when I moved into my role as coach and I get to explore nuance with a lot of individuals, I mean, it's tough because my perfectionism comes in too, of, hey, I can do this 80%, like, no problem. Why are you over here at 50%? Like, you're not allowed to be imperfect. Well, I mean, you're allowed to be imperfect as my coachee, but I'm not allowed to be imperfect in coaching you to be imperfect, right? And so it's that feeling of fighting that dysfunctional belief. And that's definitely how the relationship has gone over time, is a desire to be loved while imperfect, but also seeing a lot of the residue of that past relationship where, I go home and I bring in my 5K medals, or my when I do a Spartan races, obstacle course racing as a hobby of mine, I'll bring in medals that I've had and we'll hang them in my old room from when I was a child. But then I sit there and I say, what if I came home without medals? Like, if my mom didn't have something to brag about, like, what would this relationship look like? And so there are those moments, but at the end of the day, I mean, these are my parents and I value them so much. I care about them, and they helped, again, make me who I am. It's just at a point where I'm driving more of myself to become who I am. And it's, that relationship changes naturally.
Yeah. I mean, like in reality, there's a breakaway point, right, where you become your own person. And I don't know if you ever heard this, but in Japan, they have a crisis going on where there are men who are living with their parents into their 40s and 50s who've never left the house, never worked, never did anything. And then what the pandemic happens for them is when their parents pass.
Yeah.
They don't know how to live in the real world. They don't know how to hold down a job because their parents took care of them that whole time. And obviously, that's not a good thing. So when you considered, what made you decide that, or what different jobs did you have before you found coaching as a way of helping people?
Funny enough, I got this job straight out of graduation. However, the road to it was very difficult, and it was quite a jump, honestly. So I knew since I was younger that I did not want to be a therapist, but I knew that I wanted to be in psychology. I studied it since I was 13. I just had such an interest in it. And as I mentioned, I mean, growing up homeschooled, autistic, I mean, my first job, I was 16 and a half, and I started looking at restaurant jobs. My dad said, hey, you can come work for me. It'll be fine. But I said, I don't want to. I need to experience more of the real world. So I sit there and I said, I could either go work for you and it would be safe and it'd be fine, it'd be nice, or, like, I'm really socially awkward. I can go just throw myself into the deep end. So I did that, and I experienced as many social awkward situations as possible and grew into the person I wanted to be, which was a more social person. And I knew that I wanted to be a consultant of some form. And it was 1 year into my master's degree for industrial organizational psychology when I realized that I liked industrial organizational psychology. So it was really quite a bit of a risk. But I'm going to go back a little bit to my bachelor's. My plan was I'm going to work in HR or something for 15 years, get some experience, and go be a consultant afterwards. That was my life plan. And so I got my bachelor's in workplace psychology, said, all right, let's get an HR job. And I was only contacted by salespeople. They said, oh, you should be a salesman. You should do this. You should do that. And my dad being a salesman, I fought that identity for a long time. And, there are still days where I fight it these days. It can be tough because there's a lot of beliefs around salesmen as being pushy, scummy, like any of those examples, which I don't believe in. I believe that salesperson from our field is I'm advocating for you to have a better life. Do you want that or not? But I got my bachelor's and I just went into a deep depression because I could not find a job that made me feel respected. Like I didn't feel self-respect when I thought about working these jobs. So for 6 months, I was struggling to find it. My dad came to me one day when I was sitting on the floor, staring at the ceiling, just really thinking like, what am I missing? And he said, listen, let's just start your master's degree. I know it's not your plan. You were going to work in HR for like a year and then have a company pay for it or something. Like that's just not where we're at right now. So let's do this instead. I said, okay. So I started working just retail, got my master's, and halfway through that, COVID hit. So I was really thankful that I didn't get a job after my bachelor's because I would have been stuck somewhere else and I probably would have had to come back home. It would have cost me everything that I had. Like it was overall really lucky for me. And so I finished my master's and I had the intention of becoming a statistician. I wanted to go into psychometrics. I wanted to make assessments and surveys and go into management consulting and use these tools to help inform businesses to create lasting and impactful change. And I had no desire to be in anything touchy-feely. I knew enough to talk business with people, but I wanted to talk numbers. And so I met my boss, Steve, and it was off of the PSYOP website, SIOP, Society for Industrial Organizational Psychology, not the PSYOPs, like government, like psychological things. I have to clarify that every time because it's a little laugh. But I found that job, we talked, and it was actually the Eagle Scout in my resume that had him consider me. And we talked about it, and it was a huge risk for both of us. Am I, wanting to be a numbers guy? He said, you just do not know how to not be authentic. Like, let's talk. And what we teach is authenticity. And so he took a chance on me. I took a chance on him. And 4 years later, here I am. And I moved up there. I moved to where I'm at now in Columbus, Ohio. And I had $200 to my name. And 4 years later, I'm doing somewhat well. I'm actually finishing up writing a book about how to create breakthroughs in anybody. I apply my statistical mind and my ability to try and form everything through the framework of how do I turn this into a framework or how do I systemize this? And I use that for coaching individuals. So I resonate really well. That's why I resonate so well with individuals that are very multi-layered, because they tend to get lost in, well, I'm this and I'm this and I'm this. And so it's like there's two ways to tackle that, which is to allow for the nuance or to create a system around it. And so I can work in both of those fields. The way of, you're allowed to be, for emotions, you're allowed to be happy and upset at the same time. You can be exhausted and fulfilled. You can be both of these things. For the issues of identity, I talk about systemizing them. Where are the aspects? What are the roles that you're playing right now? And then for the roles that you're not, where do you find spaces for them? How do you create that balance? And so really I got partially lucky, but at the same time, luck is a skill that is cultivated through the life that you've created. I could not be anything but authentic in that call when I had that interview. And since then, I've grown to love the coaching process. And I miss my numbers sometimes, but we just came out with an engagement survey and we talked about that. And at the end of the day, I help people to feel seen, heard, and empowered every time I talk to them. That's my goal every time I talk to somebody is, do you feel heard? Do you feel empowered? In fact, funny enough, there was a client I had recently, and during our first session, you know, they were talking about, oh, I'm young and I'm dealing with imposter syndrome. And I'm just entering my role. And I sat there, really listened with them, and I sat there. I said, yes, you are dealing with an issue of age, but it's not just that. You know, they were feeling very overwhelmed with identity, and I said, it's not just age. They had kept latching on to age, and I sat there and I said, you're also a Black female doctor. And so,
Right.
yes, you have so much pressure on yourself to succeed, not just in the form of, yes, you are younger, yes, you are new to your role, you're also multiple minorities. You know, you have societal pressure, and then you have a family pressure. You know, she talked about being uh, the relationship they had with their family, you know, being at that level with the type of family they had. Again, trying to keep it kind of anonymous.
Mhm.
But they just started crying. They said nobody had just seen all of it like that. And I said, I do. You know, that's my job. Not just my job, but that's who I am, is I love systems. And as a person,
Mhm.
you are a computer. You are a system that is created from all the pieces of your past. You know, just as you and I are talking about my childhood forming who I am now, it's the same thing. When I see all the pieces of a person, when you see all the pieces of a person and they feel seen, heard, and empowered, they can change the world. So that's what I aim to do with my clients and their businesses as well. You know, I deal in systems.
Mm. I love that. I love that. And so many people don't know who they are. This is why I think so, their health, their mindset, it goes into where we really find that substance that's going to drive us forward. Let me share this with you. Take a look. Hi, I'm Sifu Rafael. Let's get something clear. This isn't just another fitness challenge. This is a 90-day reset, an experience designed to realign your movement, retrain your mindset, and reignite your metabolism from the inside out. Most programs give you a plan for your body. This one gives you a method for life. Every morning, you'll wake up with purpose because your workout, your hydration, your journaling, it's all connected. This method isn't about going harder. It's about going smarter. It's not about restriction. It's about real alignment. And it's not just what you're doing. It's about who you're becoming as you do it. If you ever felt stuck, scattered, or burnt out, this is your chance to take it all back. Movement, mindset, journaling, nutrition, hydration, fasting. One powerful system built from my personal journey and now passed on to you. It's time to invest in you. Spots are limited. Click the link, join the waitlist, and let's reset your life with Sifu's Mind Body Method. You help people reset their thoughts, their mindset as well. This is why I'm happy that we're talking today.
Yeah,
Because, and you even talked about it, is who are you and where are you going? What are you going to do with your life?
absolutely.
Right. And when you talk to this doctor, and she had this imposter syndrome. Meanwhile, she's accomplished so much to become a doctor, a black woman, and there's the other one. She's a woman, so she be a minority in two areas, right? Her
Mhm.
race and her sexuality, but those really don't matter when you become the person you're supposed to be. And
Absolutely.
and when you think that you're an imposter is because you don't believe what you've accomplished, I
Mhm.
think, right?
Absolutely. And, you know, I always talk about, I've got this bit of a rock, paper, scissors in my mind of anxiety and action, you know,
Mhm.
and then lack of planning is the third I had. But, you know, whenever you have this feeling of anxiety, this feeling of like, oh, I'm not good enough, and you're starting to ruminate, action always defeats anxiety, even if it turns it into a different form of anxiety, right? But
Right.
you can defeat the anxiety you feel or that imposter syndrome through action, through proving, through influencing the environment around you. So as you sit and you say, well, I'm not good enough. Okay, well, let's say that's true. Go out there and do something that proves to yourself that it's good enough. Do
Yeah.
something that makes you feel good enough, even if it's not in this environment. What is
Mhm.
something that you can do to show yourself that you love yourself? Let's go
Mhm.
out and buy a little treat. You know what? I've worked hard for this.
That's right.
Absolutely. And so as you talk about that, yeah, once you craft that core self of it does not matter, like I am going to be the person I'm going to be, and consequences be, profanity, right? I don't know the, the profanity allowance on this show, so I want to save that. But like when you have that sense of self and you can influence that environment and say, I can always prove to myself that I love myself, or I can
Mhm.
always, if I hate my job and I don't feel like myself there, I can always find another job because I'm capable. Or, hey, if I'm not doing this, then I can do that. There's
Mhm.
always tools. And one of the ways that, coaches help is by reframing things in that way. Even just hearing that you are valid in your achievements, or even just being seen as your whole self. It's like, she felt validated in that moment of you see more than just the one struggle. Because most people, if she talks about, I feel just really young, and as a doctor, it's like, you'll get it. Don't worry. Give it 5 years or so. Like I felt pretty insecure my first years too. Like that's partially validating, but probably not to
Mm.
any level of reasonable depth, not to the degree of creating a breakthrough. And
Mhm.
that's what's really important, is creating that sense of change, identifying that fear and identifying that passion, and giving yourself that light inside of yourself to where you can create that change and
Yeah.
start to live it every day, start to prove
Yeah.
to yourself.
Every day we have to, right? That's why when you
Absolutely.
said to me earlier, I said every day I want to be better than I was yesterday.
Absolutely.
So every day we have a chance and a choice as to what actions we take every day. You talked about you met your boss, but how did you even apply for this, or did he find you?
Mhm.
What was how did that come to fruition?
So I was on the Society for Industrial Organizational Psychology website, and they have since changed the layout of the website a little bit. But I got on their job board and I saw there's a lot of government jobs, like 6 pages,
Right.
so many details. And then there was one that was about half a page that said, hey, here are my 10 bullet points of what I'm looking for. Contact me. And I said, this feels like a scam. We looked online. There's no LinkedIn, and my boss is so old school. And so we went ahead, and I just emailed him, and I said, I'm searching for jobs. I'm shotgunning it, so I'm just kind of looking at anything. And I said, this is a coaching job. Well, I just need a job. Eventually, I'm sure I'm sure there's some sort of system in place, and there's some numbers or something. And we sat and we talked, and that's really how it happened. Is I went straight to the decision maker, and I said, I'm interested in the job. Can we talk? I need somebody to take a chance on me. And I was very authentic in the interview. We sat and I said, listen, I just need somebody to take a chance on me. Is this you? Because I'm going to be honest, this job also is a little shaky because I want to work with numbers, and it's very clear you work with people. I don't want to be in an office just talking about the same problems every day. And thankfully, I don't. I coach, I consult, I speak, I'm here on
Mm,
a podcast. Like I do all these different things. And
right.
so it's really, I got to grow my identity in multiple different ways.
Mm,
But the way I did that is I just took a chance, and I went straight to the person I could talk to. But I looked through the PSYOP website is how I got this opportunity. And thankfully, it's
nice.
due to my degree, the IO psychology degree. So I went
Mm,
to that site.
nice. That worked out for you. Um, what would you say is your biggest takeaway from your education?
Mm.
If you had to pin one thing down.
As I sit and think about my education, the thing that stands out is there were two very distinct, different teachers that I had at the
Mm,
same time. So for those who might be unaware of, well, the master's degree that I took, the way it was set is I took 2 classes every 6 weeks. Um, and some might be structured differently, but it's definitely very different than the undergraduate degree. And so for 2 of those classes for one semester, I had one teacher that was incredibly detailed and would say for our syllabus, they said, "Hey, here are all the things I want. I want you to submit Thursday night, not Sunday night."
Right.
And everything was a little different, and it was all very strict. And everybody did not like that teacher, and I
Mm.
loved that teacher. And then the other teacher that everybody loved and I did not like was the teacher whose syllabus was like half a page. And he said, as long as I see reasonable effort, I think it's good. And I sat there and I'm like,
Oh,
please give me a task list. This is driving me crazy.
I'm
And
like you. Oh my gosh, that would
oh
drive me a
yeah.
little bit nuts.
So it's like I wanted a structure. And again,
Yeah.
that structure. And so something I learned during that contrast of professors is I started thinking about, how do I want to say this? So there was a bit of the residue and the continuation of my teen years, which is who am I relative to other people? Because I won't lie, there are some places where I had an advisor that again would not help me too much. So all I would do was I would do all of the scheduling myself for my classes, and then I would just ask them, give me the number I need to like put your stamp of approval on it. Because I would sit with an advisor and they were so liaise faire or
Mm.
liaison faire. I can never say that word. But
Okay.
um, so what I learned was as I looked into more systems and I started to think about things, I applied my already lifelong perspective of how does this apply to other places? How do I act relative to these other people? What does this look like? And I started thinking, how are things connected? So that was really the mantra that came to my mind. And that's why I love working with systems. You give me one piece of data and introduce it to a stack of 10 variables. And I sit there and I say, oh, my mind is just everything's like firecrackers, like fireworks. Everything's just clicking now. Like we introduced this, it's a whole chemical reaction. So I love thinking about how is this connected to this? How can I systemize this? Where is this going to go? And so when I work with businesses and I ask, who are you and what do you want? And I ask that multiple times in different stages of coaching because new variables are introduced.
Mhm.
Because if I meet you first day and you say, I just have a lot of anxiety around speaking, like, okay, who are you? Who you want to be? It's like, I want to be a person that speaks. Okay, let's talk about that. So we work on that 4 or 5 months later. All right, you're starting to speak. You're building that habit. Who are you and what do you want? Well, I'm a speaker and I love that. I want to be better now at delegating because I want to speak more. I want to do more of that. Okay, so let's start working on delegating. And so that's kind of the process of growth, which is how are things connected? And then when you start applying that framework to things like, we looked at your mind body method that you had just talked about, the concept of everything's connected with the nutrition, the hydration, the fitness. Well, think of it like you're going to the gym. You might have a tough workout, but I've got allergies. So if I can't breathe one day, it's either because the track is dusty or
Mhm.
I look outside and it's raining. Oh, the rain stimulates my allergies and causes a lot of aggravation in my respiratory system. Or, hey, I'm feeling really low. Well, I'm lactose intolerant and I had a milkshake yesterday, so I'm feeling a little bloated, right? It's like, okay, understanding how things are connected is the lesson that really changed my perspective is how are these things connected? How can I connect them? How can I systemize them? How can I influence one piece with another? And so that's really the lesson I took out of it.
Yeah, it's critical when we can understand the connections between the things that shape our lives, if you will.
Absolutely.
Um, and it's even the relationships that help shape our futures, right? Everything that we do on a daily basis is based on why we're here. What are
Mhm.
we doing? And you said it earlier, who am I? And sometimes it's very interesting when I do ask somebody, who are you? They're like, it takes them forever to really come back with something they believe in.
Mhm.
Sometimes they come back with what they've been told. and it's that identity, and so many people, yeah, they'll have a driver's license and that's their ID,
Mhm.
but that doesn't mean that's their real ID. That's just
Yeah.
their picture, their date of birth, and where they live,
Mhm.
and a government number, but it doesn't say who they are. That's not their true identity. Their true identity comes from what life have you lived, what actions have you taken, who is in your life, how do you react, how do you act, how do you show up. It's so many variables that so many people don't take into account. And when you and I and anybody else tell somebody, tell me about you, oh my God, do I hear so many crickets,
Mhm.
right? Because usually they're afraid to talk about themselves
Yeah.
because that fear of you may not like who I
Mhm.
am. Right? So there's so many variables
Absolutely.
that go into why we should be used to letting people know our feelings and what we're meant to do with our lives. Right?
Absolutely. And, for those who are listening, I actually have a challenge also. Whenever you ask me who I am, I say, I try to flip it a little bit and ask a question outside of those identifying factors that you just said, outside of, you know, the job and the identifying factors like, I am a man with long hair or etc. I would ask yourself, outside of all of those things, who am I if I couldn't describe myself? Outside of descriptors, I guess is how I'll summarize it. Outside of descriptors, who are you? If you couldn't tell me your job or your identifying factors, who are you? And
Yeah.
I would tell you, for me, Aaron, I'd say I am a lonely little boy that's seeking connection. That's who I've been my whole life. And as I grow, one day that lonely is going to be it's going to be a different word one day. Maybe it'll be a excited boy or something because I'll be surrounded by community and I am currently. But
Mhm.
there are still moments where there's loneliness. And I say, well, am I ever going to really get rid of that? So maybe it's a core part of me and I like it. I don't know. But at the
Yeah.
end of the day, I've just told you a big piece of myself, and you don't need to know anything else but that to know that I am motivated to connect with people. So you now know that I am authentic when I talk with you. And I say, listen, I am a coach that wants you to feel seen, heard, and empowered. Work with me, and I will empower you to be the person you want to be. You don't need to know anything past that. When I give you that
Mhm.
line of, here's who I am, I don't need to tell you my job for you to know who I am. I don't need to tell you my hobbies. You don't even need to see me on a screen. If you're listening on your phone or your car on Spotify, you don't need to see a picture of me.
Right.
I'm a lonely little boy who's seeking connection. Do you want to connect? Yes or no? Do you want to be friends? It's literally, imagine a 4-year-old boy coming up to you. Hey, do you want to be friends? That's
Yeah.
me. And
Yeah.
that's my identity. So I would ask you, anybody, to sit and say, without descriptors, who am I? Because that's how you get to your core self. That's how you
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah. I got to tell you, I love being alone. Love it. Um, I do some of my best thinking when I'm by myself. I can't think when there's too much clutter,
Yep,
when
I
there's too
agree.
much noise. Um, so I am very much a people person, and people go, "You just like everybody," and it's true, I do. But I do also like me most. So spending time with myself is so critical for me. That's why I'm up at 4:30 in the morning. I do my meditations, I do my prayers, I work out, and all this time is, it's about me, right?
Mhm,
I got to take care of me before I can take care of anyone else. And a lot of people don't do that. They hit the snooze alarm like 30 times, and
yeah,
then they're like running because they're gonna be late otherwise, and then they never got the time to spend with themselves.
mhm,
And now it's chaos running their whole day, trying to catch up with the beauty that they could have had if they just spent some time with themselves.
mhm,
So for me, it's that time is so important that even when I'm traveling, and even if it's a change in time, I'll still get up at that time. Maybe I'll sleep a little less, but then if I'm there a couple of days, I'll acclimate, and then I'll be fine, right? But even then, I will be wired to wake up, do my thing. the first thing I do when I get to a hotel is, where's the gym?
Mhm.
And if I didn't look at their website, didn't say it, I'll say, is it open all the time, or is there a
Mhm.
time limit? And I was at a gym where I was at a hotel, and their gym didn't open till 6 a.m. I'm like, I'm not waiting for them. So I went outdoors and I worked out outdoors, right? I did functional fitness. But it's always knowing who you are and what you need to be the best version of you, I say.
That's absolutely it. Because I know some of us, including
Mm.
myself here, 4:30 and go, ooh, I think I'm going to bed that time some days, right? But at the same time, it's finding your own individual balance. Because just like you said, I actually do want to wake up earlier in some cases. I do struggle with that some days personally, and yet I still do make time,
Mm.
to connect with myself. And I want to be more intentional about the morning, but in the evenings when it's, I'm a big fan of, I don't want to say I'm not. I don't want to say I'm a big fan of the darkness, right? But that's kind of it. Is the quiet of night is
Yeah.
so, for me, very introspective. I connect with the lunar cycle and the moon so much, and so if you're a listener who resonates more with the evening time, you can still make time to sit with yourself. I work out in the evenings and I
Mm.
unwind. I hit the ground running when I wake up and I serve my clients, and then I relax in my evenings. And
Mm.
so you can also reverse it and set that intention as Raphael does. And, you wake up early and focus on yourself and fill your own cup and then go. I mean, it's finding your balance is part of it.
Oh,
It's absolutely
that's incredible. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting when you said that sometimes you struggle with that. But I tell people, hey, listen, if you normally get up at 8 o'clock or even 9 o'clock or 10 for some people, it's it's you don't have to jump to 5 or 6 or 3 hours earlier. No, set your alarm for 15 minutes
Yep,
earlier.
15 minutes at a time, incremental
And
change.
yeah, but you do it, and it may take a while before you get even to an hour, but
Mhm,
eventually you're resetting your internal clock, right? And
mhm.
so, and I love what you said. It's not when, but how,
Absolutely.
right? It's not the when, but it's the how, because the how helps you become who you are
Mhm.
so that you can say, this is who I am. This is what values I live with. This is the values that speak to me. Because one of my sons is a day trader,
Mhm.
and he wants to learn about a different business. So at night, he works
Mhm.
at a machining company, a metal machining company, because he wants to know that function. My son, he's only 20, he's about to be 21 in June. He already told me, Dad, I can retire now because of all the day trading he's been doing.
That's incredible.
And it's pretty incredible. And he's got so many sports cars. And one day I said to him, what are you doing with all the sports cars? And he said, Dad, don't worry. It's what you taught me about money. That's my safe money.
Mhm.
It's my fun money. It's not the money for investing or tithing
Yep.
or my future. That's my fun money. I'm like, as long as you don't die, I'm good.
Mhm.
Right.
Absolutely.
Stay safe. And, he said, but I think I'm going to wait another 3 years before I retire. And I said, so why are you doing this other job? He goes, I just want to learn something different
Yeah.
than what I'm already doing. And so I said, what are you going to do when you do retire? You're going to be 23 years old. You're retired. You have all this money. He goes, I, I say retire, but I want to help people.
Mhm.
So he wants to teach people what he does with his day trading because he's made so much with it, right? And for a 20-year-old to say they can retire,
Oh,
it's
that is incredible for sure. Absolutely.
um, and so it's the values I helped instill in him when he was a child,
Mhm.
right? Because I taught him the value of money. I didn't tell him that money doesn't grow on trees. I told him, but you know what? You make the tree and you'll get the money. And so I taught him all
Absolutely.
different ways of investing and all these different things. So now he's taking it and running with it. But every day that we can help our family, and we can help anyone, whether it's a client or a friend or a neighbor, it just makes us that much better, right?
Mhm.
How do you feel empowered when you help somebody?
Hmm.
How does Aaron become energized when a client comes back and goes, "Wow, thank you, Aaron."
You know, since I was young, I always knew that I was motivated by a job well done. I would say I always listen to the A Team, like, oh, I love it when a plan comes together, right?
Right, right.
That's exactly what I feel when I can see the pieces with a person, but they're not like I see the puzzle, but a person is not a puzzle. So I'm inviting them to see the same pieces. And I say,
Mm,
well, do you want to put this piece there? What do you think? What if we tried doing this new habit? And they say,
mm.
I don't know quite yet. And I sit there, I'm like, oh, it's the piece you need. But okay, it's your journey, right? And so there could be frustrating moments. But I sit there, I'm like, I'm not going to force you into this. It's you get out of coaching what you put in. And so I
Mhm,
think of it like personal fitness. Hey, if your arms are sore today, we won't hit arms, let's hit legs. Or hey,
mhm,
you're feeling a little low about your aesthetics with your, shoulders. So let's hit some shoulders today. Let's make you feel good. Let's do it. But I'm not only going to work with you on shoulders, you still have to do a full body workout.
mhm,
But we put an extra couple workouts there to make you feel, hey, I worked the thing I want to work. But
mhm.
I feel empowered when I have that moment of seeing them get excited about their growth. When
Yes.
when I can nerd out about the complexities of human nature, or when I'm working with a business on their organization and we've put together their mission, vision, values, and we're looking at who are the high potentials. And I sit there and there's a question from I believe it's CEO Excellence from I think it was the McKinsey that had put it together. But there's a book called CEO Excellence, and there's a question that I'm going to paraphrase, but it's more or less who are your top 20 people or
Mm,
20 most impactful or most important people, and then what are your 20 most important roles? And it goes without saying that you would automatically compare those lists and think, are my 20 most important people in my 20 most important roles? If not, what's going on? There's a misalignment there. Because if I have somebody that's not important in a very important role, this something could collapse. Or if I have an important person that has a lot of potential that is doing, you know, something that is, I don't want to say beneath them. No job is beneath a person, but if they're using half the ability that they could, then you're
mm,
losing out on potential. We'll say it like that.
mm. Yeah.
So to circle back, when I have those moments with clients where it's like, oh, yeah, that could work. And I see their excitement of potential,
Mm,
that's when I feel most alive when I'm working with clients. And so it's very easy to access through surveys, assessments, things like that. But it's also a lot more meaningful when I can sit with a client. And we still use like 360 assessments and things. And
mm.
it's always fun in the early process to sit and watch them find themselves. And so that's where it feels empowering is, yeah, I get excited at their excitement. I say, yes, do you see it? You see it? And they go, oh my God, it's been this the whole time. And I say, yes, it has. We just, and it feels so good. And we get
Yeah,
to just be childish and enjoy it together. So
yeah, I
it's
love it.
fantastic.
Aaron, thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights and your life with us. I truly, truly appreciate you. We're coming to the end of the show, so why don't I give you like 30, 45 seconds and you can share with us. Your link is going across the bottom. I'm going to throw that there. What can somebody expect when they reach out to you? And what can they expect from having a conversation with you?
As I mentioned, whenever you talk to me, my goal is to make sure that you feel heard and seen as your entire person. I want to see the whole person when I talk with you, and I want you to leave feeling empowered. So I always encourage people to get on a connection call with me. Let's just sit and talk. No charge. I'll absolutely sit there and just talk about, hey, who are you and who do you want to be? And does it seem like a good idea to work together? Does it feel like a good fit? If anything that I've said has resonated with you, please contact me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/Aaron Helton. And you can ignore all the extra numbers over there. You can find me pretty easily as a Columbus, Ohio consultant. But another thing you can look forward to is, if you hop on a call with me, and you mentioned that you found me through the coaching call with Sifu Rafael. I actually have an ebook that I've created that should be coming out later this year. So I'll give you a free copy of my book. It's called The Path to Permission: Channeling Energy into Life-Changing Breakthroughs. So I got a framework that's a pretty quick read because I wanted to make sure it kept up with the fast-paced world. But yeah, come chat with me on LinkedIn. You can expect to feel heard, you can expect to feel seen, and you can expect to feel empowered. Not only when we chat every time that we talk, but every time we work together. So contact me. And if you're interested in that book, come chat with me about that too.
Love it. Love it. Oh my gosh. Great insights, my friend. Thank you so much. Everybody, do me a favor. Take this show and share it. This is such great content. And Aaron's just an incredible human being. Aaron, once again, my friend, thank you. Do me a favor. Hang out for a minute. Everybody else, share this show. And if you watched it, thank you. And if you know that somebody needs to hear it, share it with them. Have a blessed day, everybody. Take care.